Our first speaker of the evening has 25 plus years in tech experience, holds 4 patents, was the chief architect of Bank of America Merrill Lynch, was the CTO of UBS, was appointed to her current role by the administration of New York City by Mayor de Blasio himself. Please welcome the CTO of the City of New York, Minerva Tantoco.
Wow, this is really exciting. It's really inspiring to be out here with you guys. And now I should update that bio. It's 30 years in the business. Wow. I started my first company in 1985 when I was still a junior in college. It was artificial intelligence software startup in Silicon Valley, which we sold 5 years later to Computer Associates. So, you know, my roots are in AI, which seems to be making a comeback now in the data world. So I'm really happy to see that. So today I'm just going to give you a quick overview. But first of all, how's everybody doing tonight? Wow. How's everyone doing tonight? That's great. And I'm fine. Thank you for asking. All right. So as my good friend Eric said, I'm the first ever CTO of New York City. So I'm going to run through a little bit of what I thought you folks in the database world would be interested in. Good. So the New York tech sector is super hot right now. We are on fire. We have 300,000 jobs, 30 billion in wages, and we're the fastest growing tech sector in the country. We've had some unicorn sightings. Do you know what a unicorn is? And you know, part of our secret sauce is our diversity. So we have a diversity of industries. So if you're doing fintech, medical tech, or health tech, food tech, fashion tech, media tech, ad tech, all those are right here in New York City. This is the place to be. Congratulations, you're exactly where you should be, techies. We have so much diversity of languages, and just recently, TechCrunch, the Crunchbase, announced that New York City has the highest percentage of women tech founders in the country. Yeah, go women techies. Sorry. And we were also named by VentureBeat as the #1 place for European companies to open their U.S. offices here, because we have all these languages. We're closer to Europe, and we're the place to be. So with all this happening in our wonderful, beautiful New York City, we decided we need a nerd in City Hall. Holy moly, we need someone who's an actual technical person. So that's me, I'm the nerd in City Hall. That arrow is actually roughly where my desk is on the 2nd floor of City Hall. I do have a few teams around, and mainly in Brooklyn and Metro Tech Center. And it's really fun. I mean, the building is, I literally am the only nerd in there. There are elected officials, employers, and staffers. But it's great because it's an opportunity to take all those 30 years of tech experience and do something positive for the city of New York. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we're doing, what we're up to, and then want to leave plenty of time, since I am the warm-up act for my esteemed colleague. I'll move along. So the first job is to implement a citywide tech strategy, a coordinated citywide tech strategy that will help New York City be the most tech-friendly and innovative city in the world. So a lot of this is really applying all those great tech things to our government tech and actually coordinating all the great stuff that's happening in New York City towards our mayor's agenda. This is what got me. When I was asked to be part of this administration, the thing that got me was a chance to use technology to solve some of the toughest urban problems. Working for the city has been the most rewarding job I've had in those 30 years. I'm not kidding. We can work on a mundane database mapping issue but know that fixing that might reduce homelessness or save lives. That's something you can't get in any other place. For example, we have a big issue with the internet divide or the digital divide. How many of you can imagine what it's like not to have internet access? It's unbelievable. 22% of New Yorkers don't have this access because they can't afford it. And that's 600,000 people. And so how would you find a job or do your homework if you're a kid and your parents can't afford it? You've got that extra barrier. And we feel that internet access, broadband access is like the water and electricity of our digital age. You can't move it without it.
Municipal broadband. Yes.
We're thinking about that. So what has the city done? Well, quite a bit so far. There's more work to do. We've spent, we committed $10 million to put broadband access in our New York City Housing Authority, people that live in public housing. We're going to bring high-speed broadband to Brooklyn and Queens. And my office actually put out a call for innovations. That's very different from how governments normally do things. We put out RFPs or requests for information. We decided to do a call for innovation, and the public answered. We got 69 responses from over 50 companies, some as small as 2 or 3 people. And we're going to pilot some of these in the very near future. So instead of thinking of the answer and saying, hey, give us your cheapest price for this, we said, no, give us your best ideas, and then we're going to make that opportunity to try out these ideas to solve the problem. Here's another example of innovation in the city that's happened since in the last year. We okay. So there was a contest a couple of years ago, actually, and the #1 answer of what we should do with the payphones was turn them into Wi-Fi hotspots. And interestingly, you know, the prize for that contest in 2012 was like a nice certificate from the mayor. Thank you. But in 2014, the de Blasio administration saw that the payphone franchise was running out and put out an RFP and said, give us your best proposals for how to turn these payphones into a Wi-Fi hotspot. So this was done by our Department of IT, Do It, it's called. And the winning franchise was a consortium of folks, which is now called Link NYC. So if you want to learn more about it, it's link.nyc. And I'll just briefly talk about this, which is part of my lead into Internet of Things. This is just the beginning. So these will be the largest free municipal Wi-Fi in the world. They will have speeds starting at 100 megabits. Some will have the capability for much more than that. They're going to have digital advertising on the side, and then have an Android tablet embedded in it, which will allow you to make free phone calls. There's no coin slots in these kids. Also, if you have a device, you can hook up to it with your device for free Wi-Fi. It's secure, private, and we also have a charger there, so you can charge your device if that's needed. So you'll start to see these rolling out sometime in next year. The best part of this is that since it's a franchise, the company that won the bid is putting these devices out. They're going to make money from the digital advertising on the side, so it doesn't cost the taxpayers any money. And in fact, the city will receive a percentage of the revenues from the advertising, so it's actually going to generate money for the city. So this is really a very groundbreaking new model for providing Wi-Fi on the street. But what about connectivity? Oh, data people. You know, in 5 years, there are going to be 20 billion connected devices and things and watches, and this is going to generate what we in the business call a crap load of data. That's a technical term, write that down. A crap load. And so this is very exciting times to be a data scientist, to be a database designer, database manager, data analyst. And I think that this is probably the single most important message I would convey to you all, is to really start thinking about what does it mean, and how can we use all of this data to really make our lives better, to make our cities safer, and to make better decisions about where to deploy our resources. Here's another example. This is part of our Smart Cities initiative, where there are, on top of the traffic lights, GPS devices. So we have right now just the beginning of this pilot. It'll soon be rolled out to everything. But basically, every bus has a GPS device, and on the traffic lights can sense when a bus is approaching and change the light in order to make prioritize public transportation on city streets. So this was a partnership with the Department of Transportation and the MTA, and in some of the early pilots, we've shown that it reduces commute times by 20%. We want more people to take public transportation. So how do we do that? We make it better and faster than any other kind of transportation. And finally, we have, we've announced at the White House a couple of weeks ago our Smart Cities Initiative's Neighborhood Labs. We'd like you to think of New York City as a living lab. Now that you've got devices out there, you've got all kinds of opportunities to improve life in the city, it's kind of like your lab. We'd like you to experiment, mix up those beakers and try new things and be that mad scientist. If something don't work, think of a way to fix it and get involved and get connected. And so what we're doing is we're doing a series of pilots around in all 5 boroughs of the city. We're developing a streamlined process for doing this, so we're making it easier to propose a project that you'd like to pilot, all with the goal of making New York City the most tech-friendly and innovative city in the world. So we're going to support and enable, for example, things like IoT standards, right? What are the ways that we can get our devices to talk to each other and make that data available to everyone? So these living labs will start to be rolled out next year, so keep an eye out for that. You're probably wondering, you know, what's the goal of all of this? Well, we put out our plan for One New York. This is the idea that a smart city is an equitable city. It's not just technology for the few. It's technology to help everyone in their everyday lives. And it's a technology sector for everyone. We'd like everyone to have the opportunity to participate in that. So I'd say 3 of our major things are smart city, equitable city. We talked a little bit about that. Access to affordable or free broadband for all. The mayor has committed to making that available in our plan for NYC within the next 10 years. And finally, just about 2 weeks ago, we announced the CS for All, Computer Science for All, which is the commitment that within the next 10 years, every single public school child in New York City, that's 1.1 million of them, close to 1.2, will have access to computer science education. This is the, yay! This is the linchpin of making sure that not only that we have the talent that great tech companies need so that they'll come here and start their companies here, but also give every single New Yorker at least the opportunity to participate in the tech economy. We think that this will help improve diversity in tech and give opportunities for those great jobs that everyone in New York can realize their potential and have a chance to be one of us. So in closing, how can you help and how can you be a part of this? So first of all, in celebration of Ada Lovelace Day next week, I'll be giving a fireside chat at the Lower Manhattan headquarters. So you can go to bit.ly CTO Talk. It's free, but you have to register to get in. Space is limited. I'll be on stage with Jordan Crook, who is the New York editor for TechCrunch, and Jessica Lawrence, who is the executive director of New York Tech Meetup. And we'll be talking a little bit about what's next for New York. If you'd like to contribute to our CS for All efforts, you want to be a mentor, you want to provide some advice, go to the bit.ly Join CS for All. There's many ways to contribute to this amazing thing. Almost there, October 14th, the deadline for Big Apps is next week, October 14th. You can still apply. BigApps.NYC that's put on by the New York City Economic Development Corporation. My office is sponsoring a Connected Cities Challenge. There are 4 challenges: affordable housing, connected cities, civic engagement, and sorry, I forgot the 4th one. There's zero waste. How could I forget? Yes, absolutely. And finally, if you want a really rewarding job dealing with some of the biggest and most complex tech challenges of your life, you can come work for us. So we created a new site just for tech jobs. It's called nyc.gov/techjobs, and let us know if you want to come and help. And without further ado, thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Minerva. We're going to proceed with this evening with our second speaker. Our second speaker this evening is remarkably esteemed. Where do I start? Among his 3 computer science degrees includes a PhD in engineering. He was formerly the CTO of the U.S. Office of Personnel Management. He was formerly a computer scientist at Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab. And I could just keep reading it on and on, but you guys want to hear him. So please welcome the Chief Analytics Officer for the City of New York, Dr. Mashariki.
Thanks a lot, Eric. Thank you for inviting me here to talk. It's really funny. The most impressive thing that I feel like that I've ever done was graduate from high school. It was a bear. I graduated from Brooklyn Tech High School here in Brooklyn. It was a beast. So it was really exciting to, Minerva reached out and said, hey, and don't listen to Minerva about being a warmer back for anyone. I probably get 1/10 of this size of audience when I go and talk, so I know who the main event is. But I was really excited when we got the invitation to come and talk. We love talking about what we do. We're a very small team. We only have 6 folks in our office. And what my office is the mayor's office of data analytics. We consider ourselves the civic intelligence hub for the city. The way we think about ourselves is that we spend every single day understanding the characteristics and the features of an urban landscape. And so we essentially, on a daily basis, take on the needle in the haystack problem. And what I'll do today is talk to you a little bit about what we do and some of the projects that we take on, and some of the technologies and capabilities that we bring to bear for those projects. And like I said, we're a particularly small team. We have what you would refer to as 4 data scientists. I don't refer to them as data scientists. When I came on, one of my first things to do was to hire up the team. There was only 3 of us. I didn't want data scientists. I wanted smart, curious, courageous, aggressive, fearless people. And so we wanted to know that they were good with data, but that was the least of our what we were looking for. And we got some of the smartest folks that I've been around for a very long time to come work with MODA to take on some of these challenges. So what's MODA? Our mission is actionable insight for New York City government. So our sort of the way we function is that we don't think about projects for the city. Agencies come to us. So agencies knock on our door and say, here's a challenge that I have. How can I use data to help me solve this challenge? A lot of times we take on challenges that require data to be shared from multiple agencies. And that's we have a backlog of agencies wanting to work with us. Also, we only take on projects that are operational in nature, meaning if you're the commissioner of an agency and you were out late last night and you were drinking with some buddies and hanging out with some friends and you came up with this really incredible idea, really funky idea, and you call me up the next day and say, hey, I got this great idea for my agency, I would love for you to work with us on it. We rarely take those on. What we want is, as an agency, what's your bread and butter? What do you do? Right? Department of Buildings, what do you do on a daily basis? How do you serve New Yorkers? We want to bring analytics and data to bear to help you take on your operational role. So FDNY, what do? You provide safety and security for folks. We want to support that. We rarely get into the space of, oh, we were thinking of this really incredible idea. My office has no time for research projects. We don't do research projects, we don't do analytics for fun. We do analytics, and when we put it out into the field, we expect that the agencies would operationalize our work and then respond to us and say, here's how you were able to help us do this, or it really didn't work, and then we go back to the drawing board. So my team, we function from a standpoint of, we work with agencies to help them streamline their standard core operations. So we think about New Yorkers on a daily basis in everything that we do. We also, one of the lesser things that is known about my office is that agencies come to us, but we don't want to fish for the agencies, we want to teach them how to fish. So we also play a secondary role in engaging agencies and helping them build up their analytics capacity internally to their agency. And so we put together training programs, we help them think about purchasing technology and software and so on and so forth. So we also not only provide analytics services for agencies so that they can make life better for New Yorkers, but we also work with agencies to build up their own capacity as well, so that they can fish, right? So when I came into office, I spent so much time, I was doing computer science even before I went to Brooklyn Tech. I went to Brooklyn Tech because they had a good computer. I knew that I could take a computer science major. I've been doing computer science for so long. One of the things that I have learned is that sometimes, if not all the time, strong values is what really has made a lot of successful computer scientists that I know strong and capable. And so one of the first things that I did was talk about MODA's value set and the things that we think about when we engage. Our principles are building sustainable capacities and solutions, privacy and security, user-centered analytics, trusted analytics. This one is extremely important. Agencies share data with us that they would share with no one. I've literally sat down with agencies where they've discussed giving us data that they have not released to anyone else. And they share data with us, and I'll talk to you about our data platform called DataBridge. We actually have a data sharing ecosystem. DataBridge, DEEP, which stands for Data Element Exchange Program, which is the citywide data sharing mechanism. And then we also, some of you may know, my office has a leadership role in implementing the open data law, so we also have oversight over open data as well. The agencies share so much data with us, and they talk to us about some of the more intimate challenges and concerns so that we can help bring analytics to bear for them, that they need to know that they're sitting across from a trusted analyst. And this is someone who will hold their data as sacred as they hold their data. Okay, so that's an extremely important value set. So let's talk about some of the projects. So this first one is one of the ones that MODA is mostly, I don't want to say mostly known for, but certainly got us a lot of our notoriety around the city. So we worked with the fire department to think about how do you minimize challenges that firefighters face when they're going to take on a fire. So when firefighters, as you hear outside, when they're headed to a fire, in that truck, they're getting all sorts of information from all over the place. And you'll see another slide of how we help them manage that information. They're getting blueprints of the building. They need to know all of the situational awareness around that fire. We help them with that as well. But in this case, if you go to a building and it's illegally converted, everything you think you know about that building is out the window. And your safety is imperiled, right? And so firefighters, the fire department came to us and said, how can you help us using data figure out how to minimize the number of illegally converted buildings in and around the city? Now, the Department of Buildings and FDNY send out investigators. Now, you know, I didn't think about this until I actually moved back from DC to New York to take this position, but New York City is a particularly large place, right? And so the small amount of investigators that they have that go out to find illegally converted buildings compared to how many buildings exist in New York City, I mean, like I said, needle in a haystack, right? And so I said, how can you use data to help us figure out where to send our small amount of investigators so that we can maximize our rate of finding illegally converted buildings? So we started to think about, what does that look like? Why would someone illegally convert their building? Take a building that was zoned and permitted for 4 apartments and turn it into 7. This is my professor, Johns Hopkins mode coming into play here. Why would somebody do that? Money. One of the things would be they would want to have an additional revenue stream. So we have access to Department of Finance information. So let's look and see which building owners have tax liens, right? Now, if you're illegally converting your building, you're likely going to be making noise, and your neighbors will likely hear it, and your neighbors would likely do what? Complain to whom? 311. So now let's go into the 311 database and see if we can find complaints of noise and building and so on and so forth. Now we also have access to everyone who applies for permits. That address that gets registered for that 301 complaint, does that address have to have a corresponding permit to do building? Let's integrate that data and find that. And then when you start looking at, take that against people who might have money challenges, tax liens and so on and so forth, you begin to needle in a haystack problem, right? You begin to shorten that group of people who could possibly be illegally converting their buildings. So what we do is every Monday, we send out a list to FDNY and DOB of top 10 people that they should go and see who have possibly are highly likely to illegally convert their buildings. When they were sending their investigators out before they worked with MODA, they had a 13% hit rate, which means a vacate rate, which means we went to the building, it was illegally converted, everybody out. This is, you know, we gotta end this, right? That's a vacate. After MODA, they had a 70% vacate rate. And so, as I said, we do actionable insight. So we don't take on any projects that don't identify the role that data plays in driving operations for agencies. And that's something that's particularly important to me as MODA's director. And everything we do has to have numbers to it. Has to show how we've streamlined agencies' work. Next, I talked about FD as well. And when they're headed to fires, one of the things that they would have to do is get information about this particular building from multiple data sources. It's about 9 all in one, right? And so what we did is we built this FDOT tool, and we took data for DOB, ECB, HPD, all of these other agencies, and put them into this integrated data infrastructure, so that now when firefighters are headed to a fire, all of that data comes into one space, but understand everything they need to know about that building. Remember, I said MODA understands characteristics and features of an urban landscape. So we track building information. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about DataBridge, but one of the things, well, here we go, DataBridge. So we have DataBridge and OpenData. So let me talk about DataBridge. We don't normally use slides, so let me just talk to you about DataBridge. So what DataBridge is, we have feeds to agencies. So when an agency comes to us and says, I have an analytics, I have a challenge. You know, say they have an analytics challenge. They say, here's my problem. I'd like to talk to you. At MODA, we like to refer to ourselves as data therapists. Honestly, we rarely, when an agency engages us, it usually takes a couple of weeks of conversations before we even start thinking about data. What we do talk to them about is their problem, right? And the things that they have that can help them solve their problems. And so we help them think about, well, what sort of data are you capturing? How are you capturing it? We talk to them all about this stuff before we put one pencil to paper, right? And so when agencies come to us, they say, we have a problem. We talk to them about their problem. We help them define their problem. Then we help them define analytics questions. So all of the data scientists that are in here know that every problem doesn't one-to-one map to an analytics question. But you have to define that analytics question. Once we get there, then we say, okay, give us your data so we can help you. Then we go to other agencies and say, well, this agency would like this data, and that data. We get it in. So we don't charge agencies for anything that we do. Our only charge is give us your data, give us feeds to your data. So what DataBridge is, over time, we've done this so many times, we have all sorts of feeds into agency data, live feeds going right now. Now DataBridge also, I refer to DataBridge as a living, breathing mechanism. Because we also built a technology, an algorithm inside of DataBridge where we have these multiple feeds coming in, and then we check on location. So many of you know how the city manages locations of buildings? Through block and block.
Building department has to do.
And that's right, the building department has very detailed mapping, but it's through bins, building identification numbers. There's BBLs, which is borough block lots, which every BBL put together basically maps the whole city, and that's what you're referencing. And then in a borough block lot, there are bins. Each building that exists in New York City has a bin. That's how they identify buildings. So what we do is, we get data from all of these different agencies, and we begin to map location across these data sets that weren't integrated. So if you've got data from PD coming in, you've got data from HPD, you've got data from TOB, but they all reference a location, we internally, as these feeds are coming in, we begin to map and integrate these addresses and locations. So we begin to learn more and more about what's happening in certain locations, because we begin to see these feeds that are referencing the same building identification numbers and the same addresses and the same lat-long coordinates. And so this DataBridge mechanism is what we build our analytics on top of. So we're storing, we're getting these feeds consistent. Some of them are minutes, some of them are hourly feeds, some of them are daily, monthly. We're getting all of these feeds, and then when we take on an analytics project, we give you a quick story. For one particular project, this is how robust this mechanism is. For one particular project, there was an agency, a bunch of agencies sat around the table. I was at the meeting, we were taking on a particular project, and all the agencies were discussing how they were going to share data and what data sets and so on and so forth. So they looked at one agency and they said, can we get your data? Because we're going to need it. agency said, well, I can give you my data, but you're probably better off getting it from MODA because they get the data feeds and we clean the data as it comes in and we integrate the data as it comes in. So it's actually more robust coming from us. So literally an agency is saying, you might be better off operationally getting the data from MODA because it's been cleaned and it's been facilitated. Right? And so this is a particularly robust mechanism and capability that we have with which to do our analytics. So here's Data Bridge. I threw this in here as gratuitous tech slides. So you guys can take a look. Obviously, we do this master data management, and like I said, we have multiple agencies. We get tons of agency data, and then this is where we integrate that data. We have an algorithm running where we send over that data here. So this is the full data warehouse repository. We send the data here, and then we integrate that data across the points that we can integrate it.
Can you say a few words about the actual implementation? You're saying an enterprise data warehouse is a typical one, or are you using other technology?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I won't, only because as a computer scientist, and you computer scientists in the house will fill me on this, I have particularly lived my career being technology agnostic. And so we don't talk about the technologies that we use, but it's your run-of-the-mill data warehouse with a little bit of extra special sauce baked in. But I don't talk about, even when I was, in my programming days, whether I used Eclipse or NetBeans or Notepad, it didn't matter. It was about solving the problem. And so we rarely talk about the vendors and the technologies that we use, because it's all, everything we do always has to be technology agnostic. That's a value for us. And I know it's important to folks like me in this room as well. So how does Data Bridge work? So this might be a little bit more helpful. And so we do agency systems, we share, this is where we do our storage and matching, as I talked about. So we do our storage and matching. I guess this thing might have a pointer. And then we do our tools, we have our data repository, and then we do our analytics work. So we built in-house a really strong analytics platform that we use. And this is sort of the way that we understand the heartbeat of the city with respect to information and data. Now, open data. So as I said, as I'm sure many of you know, in 2012, New York City passed one of the most expansive and robust open data laws in the country. As a matter of fact, it's only a few cities that actually have an open data law. Most cities tend to have open data policies. New York City has an open data law. My office is charged with implementing that law. So what that means is every single day we go to agencies and we ask them, open up your data so that we can release it so that New York City can have, New Yorkers can have what rightfully belongs to them. Because as taxpayers, that information that agencies are storing and managing is yours. You pay for it, you own it, and so the open data strategy is about releasing it. And we take this particularly serious. And that's why I talk about this data ecosystem, that there's Data Bridge, there's our data sharing mechanism, and then there's open data with which we add to that ecosystem, because it's just as important. Using open data is just as important as we do everything else. And so as Minerva talked about this concept of equity, on July 15th, we released a strategic plan for open data that says open data will be available in New York for everyone. Not just for the chosen few data scientists who like downloading data, not just for the people who were business folks who were building businesses, but it's going to be for everyone, because access to data is power. Access to data helps people change their circumstances, maneuver their situation in such a way that they can engage stronger with the city. So our view is open data allows for anyone at any time, anywhere, to engage with the government. the New York City government. And so why would we not want to ensure that everyone can have access to that? And so how are we going to get there? We're going to increase availability, meaning more data sets. And so we're being aggressive with engaging agencies on a consistent basis. So literally, as agencies reach out to me and say, I have an analytics problem, I say, well, when you come and talk to me about an analytics problem, bring a suitcase full of data with you, because we're going to release that on the Open Data Portal. We also talk to agencies about using the data that they release on the Open Data Portal as part of their analytics work. So it's no longer, well, there's open data and then there's the data that we use to do analytics. It's all the same. So we're changing the paradigm so that we can ensure that we increase the data that's on the portal. Increase usability of the portal, so make the portal more usable for people who have less technical chops. Expand access. So we're going around and we're engaging universities. So it's no longer the NYUs and the Columbias. We're going to Queens College, Medgar Evers College, and so on and so forth to engage the students on how to use open data. And this is the most important. We're increasing the quality of the data as well. But we're increasing the quality of the data through usage. And let me move. So this is a quick picture of our data ecosystem at MODA. Agencies release the data. Notice it doesn't just say open data, it says NYC data. We engage the users for use cases. The use cases help us drive what we can do, my team, and also other New York City teams can do. And what that does is then drives the amount and the quality of data that they're pushing out, which then the users yourselves have access to. And so this is our data ecosystem in New York City as MODA is driving this strategy. So let me talk to you about, I think this is the last slide. Let me talk to you about how we're engaging the open data space to ensure quality through usage. So there's a particular project that we worked on with small business services called Business Atlas. And so Business Atlas, the concept of Business Atlas is if you're Starbucks, if you're Target, if you're Best Buy, if you're Whole Foods, and you're looking to open up a business in a location here in New York, you have tons of resources available to you with which to do market research. Consultants, you can go out yourself, you got large market research team. What about entrepreneurs in New York City who don't have access to those sorts of resources? What are they left up to with respect to market research? So what we did, I'm sure I have somebody lean on the lights. What we did at MODA is we went to 8 agencies that have open data. We went up to the open data portal and took data from all of those agencies. And this is all open data, And we use a probabilistic fuzzy matching algorithm with which to relate all of that data so that we can create and understand business conditions. And we took some state data, and we took some census data, again, all open data. All of it is open, available, freely available. And we created a market research tool where you can go online right now and use New York City Business Atlas. You put in an address and it gives you the business conditions around that area. So we looked at DOB, what buildings, what restaurants are there. We looked at permitting information. If you apply for a permit and you're opening up a store and you want to have a big sign, then we did data mining on text to find out that that sign said cigarettes. So we assume you're selling cigarettes, we assume you're a supermarket, and we put that up there. We find, in some instances, we find that in one particular instance, we saw that one building, remember I told you about building identification number, there was one bin that had requested a liquor license and then also a daycare license. And those of you who have children, like, that makes actually a lot of sense. We did the algorithm that allowed for us to begin to look at and see that, well, that's a building, New York City builds up, we don't build out. So we were able to differentiate between what buildings, what shops were in what buildings and so on and so forth. So we built a full capability for you to understand business conditions in any particular area based on location. And this is all open data. This is not secret data that people give to MODA. Some agencies do that. But this is all open data. And so by using it and building apps like this for New Yorkers, we're engaging agencies to make their data stronger and more robust. And that is my time. That's a little bit of what MODA does.
Thank you. I guess that's mine. All right, I don't need it, but yours to work. All right, let's open up for questions. Yeah.
I work for a cultural nonprofit in New York. We don't have a huge amount of capabilities in the data area. We love to be able to access data from open data, but it's very difficult to find and understand what might be there. What sort of reference librarian type services or support do you have for the community at large and cultural nonprofits?
So that's a great question. So one of the things that we've been doing is, sorry,
Repeat the question.
Oh, so he was asking what sort of, so he was saying he works for a nonprofit and would love to use open data operationally at the nonprofit, but it's a pretty cumbersome process, sort of knowing what's there and how to get it and sort of how to find pieces of information on the open data portal that would be helpful. That's a good. So one of the things that we have been doing that points to two things. One is we have to engage organizations like yours. So make sure we talk. When I give you my card, we have to engage organizations like yours. MODA is going on a citywide engagement tour and talking to organizations, talking to students, talking to everyone that we can get out in front of and say, what are some of your pains and what are some of your challenges of using the open data portal? So that helps with the usability. The second thing that we're doing is going around to community board meetings as well as borough president are setting up meetings, and we go and we talk about there to the community and the use of open data. We're also training members of borough presidents' offices so that they can then be deputized to go into the communities and train. So we have a program called Train the Trainer around open data. We can't reach everyone. Like I said, I have a team of 4 analysts. We can't reach everyone, but we're going to borough presidents' offices and we're training people in each borough president's office to then engage in the community. So we have a couple of things in that space.
Yes, right there.
Sorry for not loud enough. We've spoken about taking data sets from a bunch of different places and compiling them together. And I know that's a big challenge for anyone who works with data. If you had one piece of advice to help those working on that and try to make the process more
She said that I talked about sort of taking data from multiple sources and integrating the data, and so that's a pretty Herculean task for anyone, any organization. If I have one piece of advice, gosh, let me ask you this: technical or cultural or political? All of the technical, I would say, ensure you have a particularly lean platform, right? They build these platforms and companies are selling these platforms with all sorts of bells and whistles and craziness, and then you get caught up in the hype of what you think it can do, but it just doesn't store your data in a clean, sort of usable, accessible form. Culturally, make the data. One of the things that we would always do is agencies, they used to always say, before I started this job, agencies are like this with their data. Actually, you would hope, as New Yorkers, you would hope agencies are protecting your data, right? And so that's a good thing that they're doing that. The only way to pry it out of their hands is to let them know that they don't lose ownership. So culturally, they have to know that once we have the data, they still have access to it. Right? They haven't lost ownership of the data. MODA has gained stewardship of it. Right? So that was key for us in engaging the agency. Politically, you have to show wherever you can, as soon as you can, show the value of data integration. And so whatever small project you can take on, if it's just 2 agencies, I mean literally sometimes it would just be like small data sets between 2 agencies, we integrate them and we send them on their way and say, okay, now you can think a little bit differently about this. And then that's when they come back and want bigger stuff. So I think those are some things I would throw.
Yeah, hi. Minerva, you just said that the data which is coming for agencies is crap load of data. And what we have now is data sets, whether that's for big app or which is for transit or for the police department or the fire, they're coming from the agency. So it's a limited data set, and even if that's a limited data set, it's huge data. If you look at the city, or we look at on a larger neighborhood perspective, a very large population is of it's informal economy, which doesn't register. Even 311 call, people are off the phone. So if we are looking at the city and we want our city to be holistic, and when we have the data, the smart city, the data, the urban challenge, how do we make this data, in the first place, complete?
Okay, I'm going to try and summarize that. I was pulled into the whole story of the question, but I think what you're saying is that New York is a huge place, right? So so how do you manage essentially unmanageable data set?
Doesn't give you
and
the data.
You're right. I mean, look, New York City has manages. I think it manages every building. There's 1.1 million school kids. There's 325,000 employees. If that doesn't include contractors. There's at least 50 agencies and another 10 or so, mayor's offices. And each of those, there's about 50 CIOs, by the way. So it's a big place. And I think your question is how do you make it complete? And I think from my perspective, and this is actually how Mayor's Office of Tech and Innovation and MODA work together, what is the strategy? How do we future-proof, knowing what's going to come, and to prepare ourselves? And my belief is it's not about boiling the ocean, right? I've redesigned global data warehouses from soup to nuts for like major investment banks, global investment banks, for large technology companies. I worked on merging the data warehouse when they had the AOL Time Warner merger, and then I also undid it afterwards. So you got to keep that in mind too. How am I going to undo this?
I'm actually asking the opposite, where the data sets don't exist.
Yeah.
The question is not about the big banks and everything which already have the data sets. The agencies, they have the data sets. I'm talking about the informal economy, the common people who don't put into the data set.
People who don't pay taxes.
No, people who don't feed into the data, who don't call 311, who are on the fringes, and that is the major part of the city and the economy.
So you're talking about the data that the city doesn't have. Is that what you're asking about?
I'm talking about the majority of population.
Right, I don't know.
I'll take a stab at that. So what he's referencing is exactly right. And he uses 311 as a reference. So take for instance 311. We talked about complaints, right? In my office, data mines, tons of complaints that comes in from 311. But what about those neighborhoods in New York City where people actually don't have smartphones where they can log on to 311, or don't have internet connection where they can log in and do complaints? So as we're tracking complaints geographically, then you sort of see areas in New York City that aren't making complaints. Does that mean that it's not loud? Does that mean that their neighbors aren't, playing music? Does that mean that they're not being bothered by all sorts of, rats and so on and so forth? No, that could likely mean that they haven't had an opportunity to share data with the city in certain ways. I was going to share another example, but but that's what he's talking about.
Thank you.
And I think part of the answer also is in the smart city strategy around the Internet of Things, because there's an opportunity to say put pollution sensors in areas, noise sensors, and so you're not just relying on people calling in. In fact, we collect a lot of data that no individual has put in, but that we have because there are other ways to gather data around the city. So, for example, if we do have pollution sensors, we can note, where there's a potential area. No one has to call in and say there might be a fire or the water level is rising somewhere. And in fact, one of the other smart city things that I didn't talk about was the water meters. In order to conserve water, these water meters will alert the building owners of a spike in their usage. So they've saved millions of dollars from finding leaks as soon as they happen, right? So no one had to call in for that. The water meter itself was smart and said, hey, I think I've got a leak here, and they didn't have to pay for that water, and we saved that water. So I think there's many ways to collect data.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I have a question. So how do you pursue things like greater connectivity and open data while still preserving user security and privacy of information?
Yeah, so that's the question was around privacy, and, more data, but then there's more concerns around privacy and security. One is you can never sort of be secure enough, and so that's always a constant communication. Literally on my way here, I was talking to folks at Do It around recertifying DataBridge its security accreditation on a consistent basis. We don't have to, but it's always really smart to always be thinking sort of ahead. Privacy, with respects to open data, that's an interesting discussion. So we actually partner with the law department, and when we talk to agencies, before any data set is released on the open data portal, there's multiple back and forths with each agency around the sensitivity and any PII that could be available. We've been working with NYPD to release the incident level crime data. The sole reason why it's taken a lot longer than expected is because they are intimately concerned about making sure that they don't release any PII or any information around the victim and so on and so forth. And so that's a conversation we always have. The technology is going to be there, and you have to stay with the technology, but you have to be diligent in working with the agencies on a consistent basis. And I can tell you, agencies, as well as the mayor's office, that's a paramount concern for us.
I'm working on the Link NYC project, so I've become a little bit familiar with some of the city agencies. Do you think MODA's remit is going to try to help those agencies become better producers individually of their own data, or do you see MODA as always being an intake and having to kind of clean and refine as part of that open data process, or just more individual contributors?
That's a good question. He asked about MODA sort of engaging the agencies and helping the agencies become better producers of their data, or are we sort of more passive in that process? Is that?
Yeah, going forward, like making them better, or giving them more tools to have less contextual information that has to be had when it comes out, like what do these numbers mean? It doesn't mean anything except people have Con Ed.
That's right.
Whatever.
So the answer is, are we explicit in that engagement? No. But one thing that we are clear on when we work with agencies is that using the data, and oftentimes we're the first ones that are going into some of these catacombs and these basements and getting their data out to use for operational agencies. So if it's being used for analytics purposes for the first time, the agencies themselves do get clarity on like, oh, okay, that's how we should be thinking about this data, because oftentimes they're just storing it. They're just storing it. And then when we take on analytics projects, we bring it out and bring it into the sunlight, and then when we're doing analytics on it, we do have questions. Well, why are you storing it in that mechanism? Why don't you have APIs? And why are you storing it here? And so on and so forth. And why don't you have these databases? And so the conversation becomes a part of the analytics process. But we don't go in saying we're going to make you a better agency about sharing your data. But that happens because you have to have those conversations in order to have strong analytics process and successes. Yes.
Sure. So I've heard a lot about integration with public works, organizations, businesses. What's MODA's involvement, let's say, medical hospitals, things that are governed by higher order paper regulations, nature, security guidelines, that
That's a great question. So we asked our involvement with, I would say, person data, right? Or in hospitals specifically, where there's all sorts of regulations around using the data, PII, and so on and so forth. One is, let me start the conversation by saying every single person that works at MODA, the day that they work at MODA takes HIPAA and FERPA training. Not that we have data that would require that, but they have to be certified in this training so that they understand exactly around your question, the concerns around privacy and regulations. So everyone at MODA is HIPAA and FERPA certified. We don't do person data, we do place, but we are actively engaging with NYU Langone, HHC, and other organizations to talk about exactly how we can bring some of our capabilities to bear. The closest we've gotten to that was we actually won a Citizens Budget Commission Innovation Prize for our work around the Mayor's Pre-K for All initiative, where we created a record of 4-year-olds that actually, 4-year-olds don't have a digital footprint, right? They're not on Facebook, they're not on Twitter. So how do you find 4-year-olds so that you can enroll them in Pre-K for All? And so we use analytics to go out and get information. And so we had to be FERPA as well as HIPAA certified. So that was the closest we've gotten to dealing with person information, but we're moving into that space. Slowly and surely, we're moving into that space.
Yeah. Okay, next you. Well, if you take last question for you. No, you, right there.
There's subway something that everybody here takes as much.
A little louder, we can't hear you up here.
So the subway is one of the things that probably all New Yorkers have in common because it's such a diverse place. Everybody takes the subway. Every time I get into the subway and it's crowded and it's delayed and all this stuff, I just wonder, is the city doing anything in terms of technology, like incorporating technology in ways to make this better? And I assume it's a yes, but I've never had the opportunity to ask this question. So I guess it's mostly for Minerva, because I don't know if you guys have worked with the MTA, but I'd love to hear your 2 cents on that. I think it's great, that you're working on buses and free Wi-Fi and all this other stuff, but I think the subway is really,
So the question is, Minerva, what are you doing about the subways? I wasn't sure when I took on the CTO job that was the question I was going to get, but I get it. It's part of the, making the lives of New Yorkers, everyday New Yorkers, better. So first point of clarification, which I did not know before I took this job, that the MTA is not a city agency. It's a regional authority, I guess is what I would say. And we do partner with them on a number of different things. I think, Lindsay, maybe you can talk a little bit more about some of the stuff we're doing with them now. But basically, when we are looking at how to make New York City a smart city, we do partner with them. I think also there's data available and a number of different apps around, as you can see. One of my favorites is called Exit Strategy, which is helps you find the exit you should take so you don't have to wait in line. But I agree with you. I think that's something where we can use technology. I think, certainly some of the work that's been done in there, those kiosks that were put in, the partnership with Transit Wireless that is starting to put Wi-Fi in the subways, But at the end of the day, this is about infrastructure, and that's, you know, and that's part of the bigger picture here. And it's not something you can just have an app that solves that problem. And, you know, New York City is working very closely with the MTA to help, you know, make the longer term plans around infrastructure and just improving the system itself.
That's all the time we have for questions. However, both Minerva and Amin are going to be here for one-on-one questions. Feel free to come on up. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you. Thank you, Robert.